There we all are.
Hey.
How's it going,
Nice to
guys?
meet
Yeah, yeah. Here we are. I was going to say very free-flowing hair in this.
I was going to say there's a lot, isn't it? I think we all need a haircut. I definitely.
No, never.
Never cut it.
I think I'm going to leave mine. One of our friends is really good at cutting hair, and he did quite a few people last night.
Yeah.
But, no,
How long are you going to go?
I don't know. I mean, Alex, because I've seen Alex from short to how he is now, he's inspiring me every day.
Have you always had long hair like that, Alex?
No, not at all. I went through a sort of Alex James sweep look, the sort of like,
Of course.
I grew out of it, safe to say. And what about you? You always been a sort of mid-bob length?
No, I've had all sorts.
Girls have generally always had more, the hair's been much more expressive than
I feel
boys.
like as well, everyone goes through that, like, first time you moved to London, got a very, very dramatic mullet, which was a terrible idea. And took years to grow out. So now I'm a little more cautious. But it's only hair. It grows back, doesn't it? So
I think it's wicked. I love seeing people's hair grow out. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. We should just chat about hair the whole time. Let's do that. It's much interesting. How are you guys? How are you, Ollie?
I'm really good. Yeah, I've been a bit all over the place recently, just not really sure what to do. Like, I was really focused at the start of lockdown because I had to come back from Canada, so I thought better, make something of this so I don't get upset. But now that wore off, and then I just descended into lockdown madness. But yeah, I feel like I'm on the up.
That's wonderful.
What about you? You good?
Yeah. It's a bit up and down, isn't it?
I feel like more stuff on your walls now, more planning stuff.
When I don't know what to do with my day, I put stuff on my wall and then tick stuff off because it feels like an achievement, even if it's not. So I've got a new list of things that I've been crossing off when I achieve them. But some of them is stuff like, make
up list.
Yeah, literally. And then I can tick it off and I feel like I've achieved something for the day. So that's good.
Something off. Tick.
It's got to be done. It's a sense of achievement,
What about you, Alex? What have you been up to?
I wish I was that organised. That's really commendable.
It's not organisation. It's all a lie. Don't worry. There's nothing organised about it.
No, I think it does help to have your week laid out to kind of think ahead a bit, because otherwise you get stuck in the here and now too much. But yeah, I think more of the same really. Back on the disc, got to finish that off, and looking forward to having that out the way so I can just give my full concentration to my work. Yeah, just looking forward to maybe making a few works in the garden or outside, making the most of the weather. It's a pretty nice day today, isn't it?
I was going to say it's really nice today. What have you been writing your dissertation about?
So I've been writing about the relationship between fabric and time. It sounds a bit random, but trying to sort of interweave, interweave these elements. So yeah, I'll definitely send it your way once it's done, which is probably about a couple of weeks away.
You guys are already doing exactly what I'm trying to do, but on a bigger level. So like the whole idea of this project, because basically for people that are watching that don't know, last year, Tom and I, who run Dropout together, wanted to do something with students because we went to the graduate shows the year before, and we thought, wow, there's so many amazing ideas here, and it's a lot more. I don't know, if you go to some galleries, you can tell it's just like a rich boys club sort of thing. Whereas like a degree show is much more diverse, loads of different people. And you actually have the joy of meeting the people quite often. So we said we want to do something with that. So last year we did a little thing where we went to all the degree shows, helped some people get their work online, and then had a few prizes and things, which some sponsors sorted us out. So this year is a great shame that obviously you guys have been had your degree shows taken away. So we wanted to do our best, not maybe have the degree shows online, but just try and connect some students in the same way that it would be like walking around a degree show and meeting different people. And yeah, like I said, you two are already doing it. I've got a big list. Someone's made a really good website actually of like all the online degree shows, or like what would have been.
Oh, good idea.
And yeah, you can basically submit your one onto there. If it's not on there, and they basically just have like the uni, the name of the show, and the link and social media stuff.
Cool.
So I'll send that to you guys. So
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, please do that. Sounds great. I'm quite fortunate because I'm still in my first year, whatever that means, and so I don't have the looming degree show sort of stresses, but I can feel a strong sense of empathy for the second years. Yeah, Emily, are you? What are you up to? You're on Materials Future, I read.
Yeah,
That's
I'm I'm second year, so we are at the moment just. I mean, there's been because it's such a strange situation for everyone, which I appreciate for like our tutors and everyone organising the degree show normally as well. We are at the moment still not really sure what's going to be happening. We know we're going to be having some sort of digital version of the showcase. But I mean, as you were saying, I wouldn't, in a digital showcase, get the dialogue and the conversation that you get from a physical degree show, which is, to be honest, the best thing about it. And the people that come by that you'd never get a chance to meet and talk to otherwise. So I think this is a really nice way of not replacing it, but doing something similar. Because otherwise, I'd never meet you, Alex. Because I'm in my little hole of a room here trying to work out how to deal with this. So yeah, it's interesting.
It's kind of enforcing yourself to do it in the absence of it, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I did a collaborative show with some people in this guy's studio, and it was on the premise that we'd go there and we'd work for a week. We'd make work together, collaborative paintings or sculptures or whatever, music or sound pieces. And it was on the proviso that at the end of the week, we just get whatever we made and put it in the skip. And he was saying the emphasis is that like the best things that you take away from your degrees and your masters are the connections you make and the sort of networks and communities of people, and they're what take you forward. So just to echo your point, really, it's essential to kind of have these interactions.
I mean, I think that's why you do. I mean, particularly masters. I think less so with BAs, but particularly masters, you do them because you want the community of people to do this kind of stuff with, rather than working in a silo and just working on your own. So I think that has been the biggest change in all of this, really, because we've gone from having we're a very close year as well, because we're quite a small course. We've gone from having this very intense, very exciting, really kind of, you've always got someone questioning what you're doing and someone criticizing it in a really positive way. And we've gone from that to just wallowing in our own little heads, which has been interesting. But yeah, exciting though. I mean, do you know have you discussed at all what your next year is going to look like? Is it going to be different?
It's up in the air, similar to the experience you would have had. I think first term of next year, they're preparing for it to be online, but they're also making provisions in the studio to kind of have a traffic light system. So we've kind of got this. We've got this very organised chart that you'd appreciate, and you've got to sign up and you've got a window of a limited time. Sorry, I'm painting you as some person you're definitely not, but you get 1 hour 45 to completely deinstall your work, and I don't know, it has to be changed because it's not enough time, sort of thing. And but my next year is up in the air anyway, because I just got this. I got selected for an exchange program in Kyoto, which would be amazing had COVID not been happening. But their COVID rates are really low. So fingers crossed it will still go ahead in sort of October time.
That's really cool, Alex. That's really cool. Yeah, and it's a shame that it's come at this time, but like you said, hopefully it can continue to settle down a bit more.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things where you're having to curb your enthusiasm because you want to be sort of bouncing off the walls. You've got this really great thing. I've always wanted to go to Japan anyway and see the impact that can make upon your work. But then you're also like, it might not happen, or so you've probably experienced similar things, Emily, where you want to feel excited about this thing at the end of the tunnel, but like you can't quite grapple or grasp it. So yeah,
I think as well, trying to manage expectations, so being getting positive and motivated enough to actually do stuff to get there, but then not so much that when it all potentially doesn't happen, you're just there left without, you know, just really disappointed. That's really exciting though.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's good to have backup plans, as you say.
Yeah,
are you
definitely.
sort of thinking beyond your MA? Are you thinking of what next, or are you just reveling in the now sort of thing?
I'm thinking beyond now, because about to enter the scary world of trying to get a job in the creative industry in one of the biggest recessions. So that's going to be interesting. I mean, I feel like I'm much bigger than some of my friends who have visa issues as well, because I do not envy them at all in trying to work out what to do in all of this and have the added pressures of, you know, trying to secure like a visa place. And I'm very happy to work in a bar, in a pub, in a cafe if they ever open again. And so that the actual kind of physically making enough money to survive thing isn't a problem, because I think generally creatives are very good at doing what you need to do when you need to do it.
Yeah.
I think finding the job that I'd love to have, or I can imagine having, is going to be different to how I thought it would be. I think a lot because the kind of people that come to the degree shows would often be the people that perhaps have connections or get you on the right route to finding a more, you know, permanent role. But we'll see. I'm a positive person, but I think it will happen. Whatever happens will happen. There's no point stressing too much about it, because I think then it just, you know, spirals, and it doesn't help anyone then.
What would be your ideal sort of position? Would you like to work for a design firm or sort of freelance, or what would be your dream job, I suppose?
I think I change quite a lot. I think I'd really, really like to work to do with policy change. And so look at how to, because for me, design is about communication. And I think that is something that it can be really, really powerful in. And I think I would love to use those skills and this idea of connecting people together to actually change like governmental policy and to change some of the kind of inequalities and institutional problems that we have. So I think that's like my big grand ambition. If someone wants to give me a job in any design studio, also fine. Literally.
Both sound very doable. And I suppose you mentioned communication, but I think on a governmental level, they need innovative people such as yourself to kind of try and push things forward a bit and not make it so sluggish.
They need some disruption, because they're very set in their ways. I mean, the only thing that I find positive about this whole situation is that we're in a moment where people like have suddenly seen how flawed so many different things are, because they've been, you know, revealed as these really, really badly functioning broken systems. And so I think this could be a really good opportunity to actually change that. And I think there is going to be, you know, our generation and the generation below us is so much more aware of these kind of things, because they're living in a very different time to 10 years ago. And I think this could be a really interesting moment in, you know, momentous moment in history where things take a different turn, and perhaps some of the huge structural problems that have been in place for, you know, decades could change a bit.
It's interesting you say that. Like when we started doing Dropout, I was in my final year of a politics degree, whereas Tom was in the final year of a design degree. And we did realize in that point that like how much overlap there should be. And when we did the graduate campaign last year, we got the 5 graduates together for like a group conversation, and politics and policy and things like that drove the conversation. And it was like sprinkling in a little bit of one person's practice or one person's design theory here and there, but the main core of everything was policy and politics. And yeah, you're right, it's not sort of together enough now. There's just these, and with the Black Lives Matter movement as well, that's just another thing that's shaking everything up. You're seeing like executives at magazines and all sorts all resigning now, because they're being either brutally honest with themselves, or they're being forced to be like, okay, we've been doing this wrong for however long and it needs to stop.
I think there's a new kind of era of accountability that people are like need to kind of embrace. And you can do so much by admitting that you've had problems and promising to change rather than just ignoring them. I also think design is like the kind of funny thing where people assume that it works in its own little world, but I think it is the least, I don't know, it's so flexible and it's so fluid. And I don't really just consider myself a designer because I don't really think I'm a designy person. But in terms of the kind of different influences that you get, I guess I'm explaining this terribly. I feel like design is basically like this melting pot of loads of different things, and you're always going to be influencing what's going on around you. And that will often be political, or it will often be based around inequalities or, you know, huge, big societal issues. And I think people who don't think the design looks at that don't really understand what it's about.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I feel that way in art. You sort of don't want to be a backs to the window painter. You don't want to be ignoring what's going on in the world. You don't necessarily want to be making art purely about the news or whatever. But yeah, to kind of just operate in a vacuum or a bubble sort of neglects what's going on out there. And I think what you were saying is essentially, as I'm understanding it, you know, there's two different types of designers. There are people who are maybe fetishizing, like, I don't know, a certain epoch in design, like Swiss minimalism or whatever. And then there's people trying to solve problems, like social problems, and you might fall into the latter category. I don't know, I might be oversimplifying it, but yeah, maybe there's a bit of that going on.
I think there's just so many different aspects to it. And I think I don't really like the term design or designer, because I think a lot of designers are artists. And I think a lot of artists are designy. And I think is this whole world, like you said, of very kind of traditional, I guess, concept and product design that is so different to, you know, service design or looking at how infrastructure works, which is also a form of design in itself. And so I think it's this really broad, really fluid thing, which can be interpreted however people want it to be, which is why I don't really like being called a designer, because I don't think it really describes what I look at. And I think it's been a bit of a revelation realizing that you can be really influenced and really involved in politics. And, you know, I've got a really strong science background, and so I try and use that a lot in my design. And I think that's great. I don't think it should be these set kind of, you can't do this if you're doing design. Because I remember at school, you couldn't do like a creative subject and a science together. They were like two separate things. You either chose this.
That just sums it up, doesn't it?
Right, exactly.
In that world, you'd say design, and it'd be like Alex just said, like designer might be like fashion designer. You know, it's always like a product or something like that. It's not the broader terms of what it is. I mean, yeah, school, the whole education system needs a shake up as well, because that's a clear example of how two things that should really go together. Because and a lot of people grow up and everyone wants to be creative or are creative without knowing it. But a lot of people see it as like art, as like you go and paint a picture of a flower, you know, as a hobby, or you did that when you were younger, but now it's like work life, and you know, I have a business job or a politics or government job that doesn't interact with the spectrum of design or art, as it were. And yeah, some people just they can't break down those barriers, I don't think.
Definitely not. I think it's difficult. What do you think about it, Alex? What do you see yourself as?
I don't know. That's always hard because I'm studying painting, but I make quite mixed media paintings. Like people keep saying, "Are you a painter? You make objects as well, like you make ceramics or whatever." But I think those things are all analogous for each other, or they're very interchangeable. Like ceramics is kind of pushing, moving about like coloured earth or mud in a way, which is kind of a form of painting, or what else? I don't know. Like when you're welding, sometimes you get these things called witness marks, which are these very like, you know, those Alfa Romeo cars that used to have the like, what are they called? Luminescent paint. I think that's wrong, but you know, it's got like
beetle paint where it looks like a kind of beetle shell.
Yeah, it's like 3-tone or something. It's got 4 or 5 colors in it. You know, so like there's an interchangeable aspect to all these mediums and the fluidity, as you said, Emily. So I think these boundaries are both useful in terms of I quite like hovering over conversations about painting, because I suppose that's quite enjoy those conversations, and I think I like rooting myself in that history, but it's also limiting if you allow it to be. So yeah.
It's a shame that it's all been sort of taken away from us. The reason I wanted to do this is both of you in your conversation. So Emily, you said, like you've mentioned today, that you have a really close course and how you all talk loads. And Alex, you obviously graduated from your bachelor's degree a while ago, and you've done quite a long period by yourself. And you were just saying how nice it's been to be sort of reintroduced to being around people all the time and dropping in on what people are doing, and have the same for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I took a few years out, and it was great in terms of cutting my teeth in the art world, working for galleries, etc. But then, you know, I was working in sheds, and towards the last few years of being out, I worked in these studios that were kind of meant to be like shared studios, but you'd never be there at the same hours as other people, because I'd be working, in one case, a full-time job, and then going from about 7 or 8 till 2 in the morning, some like crazy hours.
Yeah.
So starting RCA was a real godsend to me, because it was a real game changer, because you had all these people from such a broad spectrum of places from all over the world. And it's such a diverse blend of people, and everyone's really putting their foot to the metal, like really giving their all, coming all the time, and the tutors are incredible. So this kind of melting pot, this great sort of coming together of minds and of practices. And so I really miss that. I really miss walking up and down the painting corridor and just like looking each way and seeing what people are up to. Because it all rubs off on you, you know, whether you think it or not. It's these informal conversations that maybe take your work to the next level.
I was going to say, I think they're more important often than the kind of formal crits or the tutorials, because it's kind of constant evaluation of each other as you go, as you're working things out. And I think there's an energy to it that you just don't get when you're trying to do something on your own.
Yes.
What did you do your BA in? Was that in painting as well?
Well, it's pretty interesting you should say that, because I got onto painting at Brighton, and I sort of had this panic because they, at the time, I'm not sure about now, their notion of painting was quite traditional. It's purely, from what I could see, paint on canvas. And I wanted to kind of expand that notion and make objects too. So I did this broader fine art course called Critical Fine Art Practice. But they've now just merged all the subjects, I think, into one. So you've just got fine art there and painting as a separate entity. So it's a bit strange.
When did you graduate? So I think a friend did that.
11.
Oh, she was like 2 years later than you.
Yeah,
neat,
before
isn't
your
it?
time. What was the friend's name?
Steph. What's her last name? She did the critical design, fine art critical practice course.
Yeah, send me her details and I'll look her up. I might know her.
More networking. More networking. No, about the like subtle conversations. We've all had that thing where you're talking to someone and they'll say one thing, and then in your head you'll go, oh, and you'll kind of stop listening to them because you're onto something else, and you'll be like, yeah, oh yeah, sorry, I've got to go, and then you run off and scribble something down. And yeah, that's so right. I have that all the time when I'm talking to someone, and I'll just be like, oh wow. Maybe I've had it on one of these calls, and I've just been glazed over.
When you glaze over a bit.
And I go, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I used to just really like the way people say stuff. So I'd hone in on how they're saying something and then lose track of what they're saying. I like people's mannerisms, or like, I don't know. I used to hone in on that loads.
Yeah, I love that as well. I don't know if I posted that first video, Alex, that green screen thing I was telling you about, and Emily, I think I told you.
You were telling me about the green screen. How did it go?
It's been honestly one of the hardest things I've ever done, because I have no soundboard. I'm just by myself.
Have you posted it now?
Huh?
Have you posted it now?
I just posted a short little video on my Instagram.
I'll have to have a look later.
Because basically, that video was actually just, I got to a point of just, utter frustration. That was just a clip of me saying things like that was very genuine. I was just like, oh, I'm shit at this. Like, this is rubbish. And then I just put this really funny video on the green screen behind me, and it came together quite nicely. But yeah, that's been really difficult. And like a huge thing of that was feeding off other people. And that's the one thing lockdown has taught me. Like, I'm a people person. I like to think I'm a very self-dependent person, and I can, hide away but I can't. This is like shone a light on me and been like, no, you need other people.
I need human interaction, need people. I mean, I'll have like flurries of activity and be really motivated for a little bit, and then it will just disappear. And that's when I really need people to be like, come on, time to do some work.
That's the thing. It's not just the people giving you subtle ideas. It's also if you're walking down that painting, like the corridor, you're like, wow, like the work ethic of some people, then you'll stay an extra hour or two because you're like everyone else is. So there is that element as well.
100%. Tell me about St. Martin's, Emily, and what the vibe was like there in terms of you all cheering each other on to kind of better yourselves, or is it supportive, competitive? What?
Interesting, I think. So we were quite rare for a master's course that we had our own studio, and because there was only 20 of us in our year.
It's an amazing course, by the way. I'll just say, like, the degree last year was so cool, and I was lucky enough to come and meet everyone just before, I think it was last year, maybe, I can't remember, some point.
When was that?
I'm not.
No concept of time anymore. Was that before Christmas, after Christmas? Some point.
But that was so nice to meet everyone. Really nice group of people. So I'll just say that. You can continue.
I think the master's courses in general, I think the nature of them anyway, is that people are either a bit older or a bit more focused about what they're looking for. And so it's a slightly different vibe. Like compared to my BA, granted my BA was textile design. So it was, there was a lot of people more fashion focused, which instantly was a completely different atmosphere.
Was that at the same uni?
No, I did that at Chelsea.
Okay.
Quite a few years ago, and then worked in the fashion industry for 5 years before I sacked it all in and started this course. And I think within our course, there's very much like everyone is supporting each other. There's like a friendly amount of kind of competition because we're all so different and everyone is looking at such different topics and subjects. And we're all from such different kind of backgrounds, there's loads of people from fashion, but there's also architects and product designers, and there's people who've never done design ever before and have done like pharmaceuticals, and they're all together kind of working out what we're doing. And also our course had like complete access to all the workshops, like all of them. I don't know how Kieran, our tutor, wangled it, but it was wonderful. And it was one of those things where we'd always go to the technicians. I really miss the technicians as well, actually, on a side point. In all the workshops, they just know so much and just are so helpful when you come with like, I want to do this, and you've no idea how to do it, but you've got this wonderful idea of how it's going to look. And they're just so patient and calm about making these really ridiculous ideas work, and it's great. But yeah, I think our course has got a bit of a reputation around the college as being just a bit of a nightmare because we always turn up with like a week to go and we want to make like a fully working aquarium out of steel and a bioplastic or something, and you can just tell every time we come in the technicians are a bit like, oh god, they're here, they're back, oh no. So there's a lot of that. The rest
they probably love you, really pushing the envelope and making their jobs. The
rest of the uni, I'm not gonna lie, we don't really interact that much with many people. We're in our own little bubble at the back of the uni away from everyone else.
Where's that though? Are you just in your own zones and focused, or is there a bit of a us and them vibe? What's caused
I would say there's an us and them vibe. I think CSM is interesting because there's such a big fashion emphasis, and so the fashion courses, particularly the MA fashion courses, are like world renowned, but it also means that they get a huge amount of space, kit, equipment, money pumped into those courses in favour of like compared to other courses. So there's always a bit of kind of, in that respect, they are very much like, we're the fashion people, everyone else is whatever. But I think you get that kind of hierarchy in most places where there is like something they're known for. I mean, because that's why CSM is kind of, it's what it's known for.
I think it is, but it's also like, if you ask around, people know that certain artists went there and designers, like that sort of approach isn't very nuanced, and it sort of does perpetuate people like yourself not getting as much in terms of, I don't know, studio time or budget as other courses. It's a bit of a sort of low resolution way of looking at like the history of CSM, which is so rich and diverse in terms of art makers and practitioners.
Definitely. I also think the new building, which is very impressive and very fancy, is not actually it's not a well-designed space to work in.
I was going to ask about that because I knew someone who was in Southampton Row, I think it was. Was that the previous fine art place?
My housemate, she did her BA at CSM, and she was half in that campus and then moved to this new one for her final year.
Sounds like they were in the same year. So yeah, and he was like, it's a great building, but they almost don't feel like studios when they first moved in. It didn't have that vibe or feel to it. Would you tend to agree, or do you think that's changed? Have they made provisions?
I don't think they've made provisions. I think they've had to not care as much because people, if you're given a studio space, you're going to treat it like a studio space. You can't stop people, using it properly, because that is the most valuable thing about going to university, having this kind of space to do things. I think the building it's a very beautiful building, but I don't think it is designed for creative people who like to mess things up a bit. There's very much there's a bit of a preciousness about it, and it's an amazing space for the degree shows and for the MA fashion show when it goes down the middle of the big kind of street in the middle. It's really beautiful, but all the light and all the space of the building is focused on those public areas rather than the actual space that most people use. Like, all the workshops are designed terribly, and they've had real issues with all the technicians having because the airflow hasn't been designed with that in mind. It's just been done. They're kind of shoved in corners, and so they don't have proper fresh air coming in, and they can't open any windows and all this kind of stuff. So I mean, I loved being there. It was a really amazing place to be, but I think practically it's not really the best for an art school. And also it's in a really weird area. King's Cross is bizarre. There's just nothing there for people who want to spend less than £3 on lunch, for example.
Yeah, it reminds me a bit of did you ever read is it The Magician's Nephew, the C.S. Lewis book? Did you ever read it?
That one.
It was like this world between worlds, and it had all these pools that you could jump in and go to other worlds. But it feels like that. There's something a bit limbo-y about the area. I don't know. I do like it though.
It's shopping set. There's loads of shops now as well, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a huge. There's what's it called? Cold Drops Yard, which is the kind of fancy shopping area where there is not a normal shop in there. They're all lovely and it's very beautiful, but it's this huge amount of space, which is very strange when you're right next to Camden, which is, has a very different kind of atmosphere and vibe to it. So it's a strange place. It's also so new. Everything is so new. And I think it's quite problematic sometimes where they've placed this art school, because it's a bit, we're right next to the big Google headquarters. It just feels a little bit like two different worlds rubbing shoulders very closely, which is very interesting, I guess. And there's been a lot
I certainly like the sort of aesthetic of the building in general, and the sort of industrial element, and the cobbles and the canals. There's a romance to being next to the canals, isn't there? And you can sort of see why they've done it, but I'm sorry, maybe the execution's not perfect, I suppose. But yeah,
are you
still got
Emily? Are you you said that maybe they would do a real a in-person show at some point, and you sort of expressed there's that thing of well, I might not be in London whenever you get this together. Is that still something they're talking about?
I haven't heard anything else about it. I mean, they said when they were doing that, it would be completely obviously dependent on what happens. And it could be in November, or it could be in January, or it could not happen at all. I think it's difficult because, like you were saying earlier, Alex, there's, we have a really multicultural, really exciting, interesting group of people, a lot of whom can't just hang around in London. And so me not being able to be in London is more because I may have got a job somewhere else, if I ever get a job. But a lot of people, it's out of they can't stay here. So I think it's quite short-sighted of the uni actually to assume that that's going to be a good enough alternative. At the moment, we're looking at Dutch Design Week. They've just released their kind of open call to students, and you can apply to be, it's going to be a virtual showcase, but you can apply to be on their virtual showcase as groups. So I think we're going to do it as a course rather than individually, so that we can try and do this thing collectively and have a bit more say of how it looks as a whole, because I think that's really exciting about a degree show as well. Like, you have this curatorial impact to it and you can shape it. And, you know, we had these big grand ambitions for our degree show to do like soundscapes and, you know, create a scent for each area that went with the projects in that and all this kind of stuff. So I think doing it collaboratively could be really cool and really interesting.
That sounds incredible, and it affords you like an ability to do a show within a show, doesn't it? So you can have your little showpiece, your work, but then how that speaks to the rest of the work is another curatorial project in itself, isn't it? I think that's really exciting, and I hope you get to execute it. The Dutch design.
I'm going to reach out to some people that are trying to organise those kinds of shows. I'm kind of interested, but I feel like if I'm talking to loads of people, it's probably good to know. So maybe I can point people in the right places. Before we go, is there any last things that, like, on like a student, like sort of like thinking about students, like what do people need? What do you guys have any final thoughts on it? Do you have any ideas?
In terms of what kind of support do students need now, sort of thing?
Yeah.
I think people need a lot of mental health support. I think honestly that has been the biggest thing for me and a lot of people I've spoken to. Is I think it's the connections that you make at uni and the actual interaction. And the minute you don't have that, you know, I get on with my housemates very well, but they are very different. You know, they are not people who are in any sort of design practice. And so there's a very different kind of way of discussing things like this and talking about things and motivating each other. And I think like loneliness is a huge thing. I think that's going to be a really big thing after this, because people aren't necessarily, you know, I spend so little time at home normally. And so it's really strange to be spending this much time in my house.
Yeah, I was one of those people that out the door as soon as possible, just because you feel like there's more possible outside, you know what I mean? You're like, get out, and that helps you get going. Whereas if I'm here, Netflix is like, hey, just like, come on.
Yeah, I think I'd echo what Emily was saying and sort of add to it and say, I think when these big policies are being made by unis, people fall between the cracks because, you know, the senior management make these statements, these sort of general statements, and there's like a lack of communication, and it means that the individual students spend a lot of time questioning what's going on and sort of feeling a bit neglected. Maybe many people more than myself actually, but just like I've noticed it and I've witnessed it, and just reassurance is really important, and communication.
Definitely.
You know, it's so important for what Emily's like practice, but it's just important in general. A lack of communication can be really like detrimental to people's mental health, and we're not talking about small pocket change when we're talking about tuition fees. Like,
no,
I feel like people are
say that next, actually.
Yeah, people are playing around with people's lives and their livelihoods, and time's such a precious commodity that it would just go such a long way to have, you know, incrementally better communication. So yeah, I'd boil it down to that.
Cool. Well, thank you both. It's good to get this going. I'm excited, and do say if you got any people that want to get involved. I've had a few emails from people, so if people want to get involved, or you think like, and the more like diverse the better. Like, the good thing about this degree show list is there's quite a few like all around the world, so that'll be quite interesting to get different people together.
I think that is the one kind of comfort in all of this, is that this is not like an isolated thing. This isn't just a few of us going through this. This is, you know, thousands of people in our situations and in much worse situations.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of the reality of that is obviously not a good thing, but it changes the situation in the way that I'm thinking about it anyway, slightly.
Yeah, I think it could be quite healthy in sort of flattening those stratas of like different art schools and
Definitely.
sort of, the like tribal aspect of I go to X art school, I go to Y art school, and just create a sense of solidarity that we've all been through this situation together. And yeah, maybe it will sort of create a blossoming community, a broader community of people who sort of need to have these kind of conversations. So thank you very much for facilitating.
It'd be nice to see all you become friends beyond, and you know, you can forget about me. How did we meet? I want you to be in that. How did we? It was that guy. Who's that guy? I don't know.
Do you know what? I would genuinely love to come to your degree show as and when, and just share.
Same to you next year. I hope everything goes well for you next year. If you ever need a hand with anything, you know, I don't know what I can offer, but it's always nice to know you've got like a friend externally in a perhaps, you know.
I think everyone has something to offer. Like the really cool thing about doing this with so many different people is even if it's like small like tips of how to work in like isolation and like things like that. Like people just weighing in with their different little things, even if it's not even really to do with it, even making loads of checklists, like that's great, or like doing something.
Can I just say, this is not like, I am not an obsessively checky person. I think this is a bit like when you're revising for like your A levels. You spend ages making the timetable because it's a time killer before you actually do the work. So yeah, although this does look a little bit psycho, doesn't it? This is my daily schedule that I have not stuck to once.
Yeah, that's a piece of art in itself, isn't
it? I mean, it's lovely, but it's useless. I don't look at it. So there we go.
What did that say? Work.
Yeah.
WRK.
Work.
That's great.
All right, guys, thank you so much, and I'll hopefully speak to you soon.
Yeah, thank you. It's been lovely meeting you.
Now on Instagram or something, Alex, and I'm gonna make sure see if Steph is someone that you might know her.
Yeah, that would be grand, and look forward to chatting to you both in the flesh sometime soon.
Yeah, sure.
Look after yourselves.
You too. Stay safe, guys. Bye.